thank you for that intro. I'm really thrilled to be here today. And as already been said, I had a business that I sold. And once I sold that business, I had the opportunity to do something different. But before I did that thing, I had time to reflect on what happened in that 30 years of running, growing, and selling that retail business that I joined straight from school. And what I thought about was how my motivation dipped from being very high sometimes and then being lower other times. And the reason why it was sort of fresh in my mind was that towards the end of running that business and before I sold it, my motivation for it had dipped quite considerably. And really, I realised that I'd made a few errors, which I'm going to share with you. And I'm going to talk a lot about motivation. And motivation is what I call the energy that we need to perform our best. Sometimes it's misunderstood. And so hopefully after today, you might understand motivation maybe in a different way that's more helpful in many ways, hopefully. So I'm going to share a screen. I'm going to talk about making the invisible visible. And the reason being that I didn't really know what motivated me. And when you don't know about something and it's not really visible, it's quite difficult to deal with. So if we can make something more visible, we can actually then do something about it to improve it. I talk a lot about falling into the swamp. And when you get stuck in a swamp, you get stuck and you can't really get out of it because you just keep sinking into it because you've just found your way into there somehow. It's not somewhere where you headed to, but once you're in there, it's quite difficult to get out without some help. Luckily, I was able to get some help at the right time. So energy is the key. I've mentioned it already. And there is a lot of changes going on, I'm sure you noticed, with regards to the energy, how we generate energy. We've got obviously solar energy is a key, and obviously wind energy is also important. So energy is being generated in a different way. So I want you to start thinking about where you get your energy from. Where do you get energy from? What gets you out of bed in the morning that gives you energy? And conversely, what actually doesn't, and what actually saps your energy, particularly when you're at work. And what do you think about is what gives you fire, what fire keeps your fire burning, and also what douses that fire and puts it out and makes it feel as if you just had a bucket of ice water just stuck on your dumped on your head. So I want you to think about the three things, or I'm going to actually talk about the three things that we need to really perform well at work. The first thing we've got to do is got to set a direction. And once we've set that direction, we've got to then make sure that we have the skills that we need to be able to go on that set direction. The third element we need, not surprisingly, is motivation. And that these three things are equally important, and we need to think about all of them. And I would suggest most people think about direction and skills, but don't think about motivation. I certainly didn't when I was running my retail business. It wasn't something that even crossed my mind, to be honest. But it's not now. It's front of mind, and every decision I make is in line with what motivates me, and that's also obviously what I help my clients with. So these three things sort of interact with one another. So as I've said, it's not one thing's more important than the other. We need to make sure that we pay attention to all these things, but each one influences the other. So what motivates us will influence the direction we set, and obviously the skills we have will obviously influence the direction we're heading as well. So these are all interacting with one another. So it's not one thing more important than the other. It's about making sure that we're paying equal attention to all three things. But what I'm really actually talking about here, whether you've picked it up or not, is these three things. It's our what, it's our how, and our why. Now, I'm sure many of you have read Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why. And it's a great book, and I totally agree with it. And maybe the why should be at the top as the thing that we start with, particularly as we are, most of us are entrepreneurs running our own businesses. We've got to think about why are we doing what we do? So this is why, this is how the three elements fit together. And we've got to think about all three elements as I explained with the direction, skills, and motivation. The interesting thing, though, is that the what and the how, they are visible. We can tend to see what people do, and we can also see how they do it. But we can't really see why people do what they do. And that's why it's so important to be in touch with it, and also realize that by sharing that with our team, our clients, it adds to the value that we bring to them if they can understand why we do what we do. So first, I think we should just stop and just think about what motivation is, because I did explain at the beginning, some people get a bit confused about what motivation is. Motivation is firstly, it's made up of two words. The first word being motive, which is equal to our reason, and action is the second word, which is what we do because of that reason. So motivation is our reason to do something. And when we think about that in the context of a motivational speaker, it's questionable whether actually someone can motivate us. The only way they can really motivate us is understanding what it is that motivates us. So it's sort of like a different way around with regards to going to hear someone speak to be motivated. Actually, what we should be thinking about, well, what motivates me? And let's go and find how that can be fulfilled. So we need to be able to identify why we go to work. And these are the I'm going to share with you now 9 reasons we go to work according to the motivational maps and model that I use. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time going into all 9 of these motivators. All I'm going to say about them is that we're all a combination of all 9. But what we've got to do is actually find out which ones are most important and which ones are least important. Find out and give them a value, and then make sure that those things that are most important to us, we're spending time doing, and the things that aren't so important, try to avoid spending too much time doing those things. This is what I mean by having those motivators in order. We have here an example of a motivational map with someone who is highly focused on the searcher motivator, which is making a difference, which is one of my top 3. So this person is very focused on doing something that's meaningful, worthwhile. What they feel is obviously meaningful and worthwhile. Obviously, that can be quite personal. They're also motivated by being creative, so new ideas and innovations are motivational for them. And they're also motivated by the friend, which is the belonging motivator, which means that they want to feel that they belong. They come to work and they work with people that they like and feel connected to. What they don't particularly want on the bottom right hand corner, it says the defender. What they don't like is things to be stable and secure and predictable. So this is someone, if you think about the searcher and creator, that's all about change. And the thing that they least want is things to stay stable. So when we think about the most important and the least important, what we've got to do is make sure, as I said, that we are fulfilling those top 3 motivators, and making sure that we're not spending too much time in doing things that are linked to the lowest motivator. But there's a big but here. Sometimes our lowest motivator can be our Achilles heel. My Achilles heel is the director motivator. I don't really want to be responsible or in charge of people and resources, but I know that I have to do that because otherwise I'll never really sort of get to where I need to go. So, and in this case, this person is actually trying to make a business work for him, And one of the things that he realizes he's not been doing is actually making things predictable so that things can actually work without him. So he's working to make sure that his business now is set up with some systems so it works without him, and there's a process that people can follow as opposed to being reliant on him being there all the time. So sometimes our lowest motivator can be our Achilles heel. So a quick mention of my book. It's already been mentioned. And before I think I've got a few minutes left. I just want to tell you a couple of stories about some clients I helped recently, and astonishingly, they both told me afterwards that I actually helped to save their business. The first person was looking for a job, and she was getting really demotivated by a business. She wasn't really feeling it. She was having trouble getting out of bed in the morning to do what she was doing. And so I happened to meet her at a networking event, and she took up my offer to complete a motivation map. And what it told her was the number one motivator was freedom. So getting a job would have been probably the worst thing she could have done. But what she realized was she had high friend, which I've mentioned already. The friend is about belonging. And because she wasn't really feeling it, the problem was that she'd attracted the wrong type of client to her business, and she was serving too many clients that she didn't really have connection to. So she quickly put that right. She thought of a strategy, and the best strategy to make people move on is to put your prices up. And that was very successful. That those people that were causing the most aggravation and not feeling connected to were the ones that paid her least. So that solved the problem, and now our business is growing about 30% last year, she told me, and she's working with clients that she likes working with, and she's working less hours. The other one was a similar situation where actually this person was thinking about closing their business down because it was causing them too much aggravation. Wasn't motivating them. And their motivation map indicated, again, freedom was important. But actually, one of the things that they wanted to be was a specialist in what they do. So they weren't that. They were a generalist. And consequently, they were having to pitch to get work. And because that was competitive work, they were finding that they were having to cut their margins, and work was becoming less and less lucrative, and having to work more and more hours, and he was working more and more hours at the weekend. Consequently, his top motivator of freedom was not being met because he was having no free time at all. So he switched his business to specialist services. He got trained in new areas which were in line with what he was doing before, similar sort of things but more specialist. And now he's charging more, working less, got his weekends back, and is focused on the things that really are going to fulfill himself, firstly, in his work. And when those things are happening, then the rest of it sort of falls into place. And his business has doubled almost in sales in the last 12 months. And he told me recently that he'd already, so far through the year, he'd already done the same turnover as he did the whole of last year. So he's very happy from a business that was going to shut down to one that's thriving. So obviously that's, for me, being a high searcher, making a difference, it fills my heart with, obviously, that makes me feel good and motivates me.